The knife was 3 inches from the waitress when Marcus moved. In 2 seconds he'd go from tired single dad to bleeding hero. In 2 hours he'd discover that sometimes saving someone else saves your whole world. Sometimes courage creates miracles you never saw coming. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching, also like and subscribe for more stories. The rain drummed softly against the windows of Danny's diner as Marcus Williams sat in the corner booth, watching his 6-year-old daughter Emma carefully color her placemat. Her tongue poked out slightly in concentration, a habit she'd inherited from her mother. Marcus smiled, though the expression carried the weight of 3 years of single parenthood. "Daddy, look. I made the butterfly purple and gold," Emma announced, holding up her masterpiece. "That's beautiful, princess," Marcus said, his voice warm despite his exhaustion. He'd just finished a 12-hour shift at the construction site, his hands still bearing traces of concrete dust despite multiple washings. The diner wasn't fancy, but it was their Friday night tradition. Every week after Marcus picked Emma up from daycare, they'd come here for dinner. It was all he could afford, but Emma loved it. She loved the kind waitresses, the jukebox in the corner, and especially the chocolate chip pancakes they served for dinner. "Can we get the pancakes again, Daddy?" Emma asked, already knowing the answer. "Of course we can," Marcus replied, catching the eye of their usual waitress, Sarah. Sarah Martinez had been working at Danny's for 2 years, saving every penny for nursing school. At 23, she had dreams bigger than this small town, but she never let that show in her service. She was especially fond of Marcus and Emma, always making sure Emma got extra whipped cream on her pancakes. "The usual for my favorite customers?" Sarah asked, approaching their table with a warm smile. "You know us too well," Marcus chuckled. "Chocolate chip pancakes for the little lady, and I'll take the meatloaf special." As Sarah walked away, Marcus noticed a man at the counter who made him uncomfortable. The stranger was agitated, speaking loudly into his phone about money and debts. His movements were erratic, and Marcus instinctively moved closer to Emma. "Daddy, that man sounds angry," Emma whispered. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just keep coloring," Marcus said softly, keeping one eye on his daughter and another on the situation developing near the counter. The man at the counter was Jake Morrison, a local who'd fallen on hard times. He'd lost his job 6 months ago, his wife had left him, and now the bank was threatening to take his house. Desperation had driven him to a dark place, and tonight, that darkness had followed him into Danny's diner. Sarah returned with their drinks, setting down Emma's chocolate milk with a paper umbrella in it. "For the princess," she said, making Emma giggle. But as Sarah turned to leave, Jake Morrison called out to her. "Hey, waitress." Sarah approached him cautiously. Something about his demeanor set off alarm bells in her mind. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yeah, you can help me," Jake said, his voice slurred slightly. "I need money." "The register, open it." The diner fell silent. The few other customers looked up from their meals, confusion and fear creeping across their faces. Sarah's hands trembled as she processed what was happening. "Sir, I can't do that." "I don't have the key to the register," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. Jake's face darkened. "Don't lie to me." He stood up abruptly, and that's when everyone saw the knife in his hand. It wasn't large, but it was sharp, and in his desperate state, it might as well have been a sword. "Please, sir, let's just calm down," Sarah said, backing away slowly. Emma looked up from her coloring book, sensing the tension in the room. "Daddy, what's happening?" Marcus's protective instincts kicked in immediately. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan before Emma was born, before his wife died in that car accident, before his world had narrowed to just him and his daughter. Some training never leaves you. "Emma, I need you to slide under the table and stay there, okay? Don't come out until Daddy says," Marcus whispered urgently. "But Daddy..." "Please, princess. Trust Daddy." Emma scrambled under the table, her small body trembling with fear she didn't understand. Jake was getting more agitated. "I need that money. My house. They're taking my house tomorrow." "Sir, please put the knife down," called out Harold, the elderly cook who'd emerged from the kitchen. "We can work something out." "No. No more talking," Jake shouted, moving closer to Sarah. "Open the register or I swear." That's when Marcus acted. He'd been calculating distances and angles, just like he'd been trained to do. Sarah was 3 steps from Jake, Jake was focused on her, and Marcus was 8 feet away. It wasn't ideal, but it was what he had to work with. Marcus launched himself from the booth, crossing the distance in less than 2 seconds. But Jake saw him coming and spun around, the knife leading the way. "Stay back," Jake screamed. Marcus didn't stay back. He couldn't. Not with Emma in the room, not with Sarah in danger, not with innocent people who just wanted to eat their dinner in peace. The knife caught Marcus in the shoulder as he tackled Jake to the ground. The pain was sharp and immediate, but he'd felt worse. What mattered was that Jake was on the ground, the knife skittering across the floor away from everyone. "Call 911. Marcus shouted, pressing his hand against his shoulder where blood was beginning to seep through his work shirt. Sarah grabbed her phone with shaking hands, dialing the emergency number while Harold rushed over with kitchen towels to help with Marcus's wound. Jake was crying now, all the fight gone out of him. I'm sorry, I'm losing everything." Marcus, despite his injury, looked at the broken man with compassion. "I know, buddy. I know what it's like to lose everything. But this isn't the way." Emma crawled out from under the table, tears streaming down her face. Daddy, you're bleeding." "I'm okay, princess." "Daddy's okay," Marcus said, though his face was pale from blood loss and adrenaline. The next few minutes were a blur. The police arrived first, followed closely by an ambulance. The paramedics worked on Marcus's shoulder while one of the officers cuffed Jake, who offered no resistance. "You're going to need stitches," the paramedic said, "but it missed anything vital." "You're lucky." "I don't feel lucky," Marcus mumbled, watching Emma cling to Sarah, who was comforting her while giving her statement to the police. That's when something beautiful happened. Harold, the cook, was the first to stand. He'd been watching everything unfold, watching this single father risk his life for a waitress he barely knew beyond their weekly dinner visits. Harold began to clap. One by one, the other customers in the diner stood up and joined in the applause. Sarah was crying as she clapped, Emma was confused but clapping too, and even some of the police officers were nodding their approval. But it didn't stop there. Word of what happened spread through the small town like wildfire. By the time Marcus was released from the hospital 3 hours later with his arm in a sling, there was a crowd waiting outside Danny's diner. Tom Bradley, who owned the hardware store, was the first to approach Marcus as he and Emma walked back to their old pickup truck. "Marcus, I heard what you did tonight," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. That was something special." "I just did what anyone would do," Marcus replied, uncomfortable with the attention. "No, son. Not everyone would do that," said Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who ran the local flower shop. "You put yourself between danger and innocent people. That's heroism." Emma held tight to her father's good hand, still shaken by the evening's events but proud in a way she couldn't articulate yet. "We want to do something for you," Tom continued. "The whole town's been talking. You work construction, right? I know it's hard work, especially for a single dad." Marcus nodded cautiously. "Well, we've been talking to folks. Sarah told us you and Emma come here every Friday night. She says Emma always orders the same thing, and you always make sure she's happy before you think about yourself." More people gathered around, faces Marcus recognized from around town but had never really talked to. The grocery store clerk, the librarian, the man who ran the gas station, parents from Emma's school. "We want to help," said Janet Foster, a teacher at Emma's elementary school. "We've started a collection. It's not charity, Marcus. It's community. It's people wanting to help someone who's shown us what real courage looks like." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "I can't. I don't need." "With respect, Marcus," interrupted Pastor Williams from the local church, "sometimes it's harder to receive help than to give it. But sometimes you have to let people do good things. It's good for them too." Emma tugged on her father's shirt. "Daddy, what are they talking about?" Marcus knelt down to Emma's level, wincing slightly from his shoulder. "They're talking about kindness, princess. About how when people do good things, other people want to do good things too." "Like when you helped the scared lady?" Emma asked. "Yeah, like that." Over the next few days, the kindness multiplied in ways Marcus never could have imagined. The local newspaper ran a story about the incident, calling Marcus a hero, though he consistently deflected that title. "I'm just a dad," he told the reporter. Any parent would have done the same thing. But the story touched something in people. The small-town newspaper story was picked up by larger papers, then by local TV stations. Soon, Marcus's act of selfless courage was being talked about across the state. Donations began pouring in. The diner set up a collection jar that filled up daily. People from neighboring towns drove over just to contribute. The local bank set up a formal fund for Marcus and Emma. But the most meaningful help came in different forms. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, who ran the local medical clinic, called Marcus personally. "Your shoulder's going to need physical therapy," she said. "I'd like to provide that at no cost." Margaret Thompson, who owned a daycare center, called next. I heard about what you did and I know you're raising Emma alone. I'd like to offer free after-school care for Emma. Every child deserves a safe place to go after school, and every parent deserves not to worry. The offers kept coming. The local mechanic offered free maintenance on Marcus's truck. The grocery store manager set up an account that would cover Marcus and Emma's groceries for 6 months. Emma's school principal called to discuss a scholarship fund that had been established specifically for her future education. But perhaps the most touching gesture came from an unexpected source. Jake Morrison, the man who had attacked Sarah and whom Marcus had stopped, wrote a letter from jail. Sarah brought it to Marcus personally a week after the incident. "He asked me to give this to you," Sarah said, her own eyes red from crying. "I've read it. I think you should too." Marcus opened the letter with his good hand, Emma coloring quietly at the kitchen table nearby. "Dear Marcus, I don't know if you'll read this and I don't know if I deserve for you to read it. What I did was wrong in every way possible. I was desperate, but that's no excuse for putting innocent people in danger. I've been in jail for a week now, and I've had time to think about what happened. You could have stayed in your booth. You could have protected just your daughter and let someone else deal with me. But you didn't. You stopped me from doing something I would never have been able to live with. You saved Sarah from getting hurt, you saved your daughter from seeing something horrible, and in a weird way, you saved me from becoming someone I'm not. I heard about all the good things people are doing for you now. You deserve every bit of it. Not because you're a hero though you are, but because you're the kind of person who makes other people want to be better. I'm getting help in here. Real help. And when I get out, I'm going to try to be the kind of person who helps instead of hurts. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. Jake Morrison." Marcus folded the letter carefully, his throat tight with emotion. "What did it say, Daddy?" Emma asked, looking up from her coloring. "It said that sometimes when we do good things, it helps other people learn to do good things too. Like how everyone's being nice to us now?" "Exactly like that, Princess." The Friday after the incident, Marcus and Emma returned to Danny's diner. Sarah had insisted they come, saying she had something special planned. When they walked in, the entire restaurant erupted in applause again. But this time Marcus didn't feel embarrassed. He felt embraced by a community he'd never realized he was part of. Their usual booth had a small plaque on it now, "Reserved for Heroes." Emma giggled when she saw it and Marcus couldn't help but smile. "The usual?" Sarah asked, but her smile was brighter than ever. "Actually," Marcus said, looking around at all the friendly faces, "I think tonight we might try something new." As they ate dinner, people stopped by their table to chat, to thank Marcus again, to tell Emma how brave her daddy was. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus felt like he and Emma weren't facing the world alone. The money that had been donated was more than Marcus had ever seen at once. It was enough to cover Emma's daycare for 2 years, enough to fix his truck properly, enough to move them into a better apartment, and enough to start a college fund for Emma that would actually make a difference. But beyond the money, beyond the free services, beyond all the tangible help, something more important had happened. Marcus and Emma had been welcomed into a community. They had found their place in the world. Over the following months, Marcus made it his mission to pay the kindness forward. He volunteered at the local food bank on weekends, Emma helping him sort donations. He started a handyman service for elderly residents, using his construction skills to help people who couldn't afford repairs. When the local newspaper asked him about his volunteer work, Marcus's answer was simple. "When people show you kindness, you don't just receive it. You pass it on." Emma, now 7, had learned something important too. She'd learned that her daddy was someone special, not because he was perfect, but because he was willing to help others even when it was hard. "Daddy," she said one evening as Marcus tucked her into bed in their new apartment, "are you really a hero?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I think heroes are just regular people who choose to help when someone needs it. So maybe we're all heroes sometimes. I want to be a hero like you when I grow up." "You already are, Princess. Every time you're kind to someone at school, every time you share your toys, every time you help someone who's sad, you're being a hero." Emma smiled and closed her eyes, safe in the knowledge that her daddy would always protect her, and that they were surrounded by a community that would always care about them. Marcus turned off the light and walked to the kitchen, where Sarah was waiting. They'd been dating for 2 months now, taking things slow for Emma's sake, but building something real and lasting. "She asleep?" Sarah asked. "Finally." She wanted to hear the story about how we met again. Sarah laughed. "You mean the story about how you nearly got yourself killed protecting me?" "I prefer Emma's version. In her story, I'm a knight, you're a princess, and the bad guy learns to be good in the end." "Maybe Emma's version is the most accurate one," Sarah said, taking Marcus's hand. Outside, the town settled into its quiet evening rhythm. In houses all around them, people slept peacefully, knowing that there were still good people in the world. People like Marcus Williams, who proved that heroism isn't about being fearless, it's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. And in Danny's diner, Harold the cook prepared for another day, knowing that every Friday night, he'd see a single dad and his daughter sitting in their special booth, reminding everyone that kindness creates more kindness, that courage inspires more courage, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is simply show up for the people who need you. The plaque on the booth wasn't really about Marcus being a hero. It was about all of them choosing to be heroes for each other, one small act of kindness at a time. As Marcus often told Emma, heroes aren't born. They're made by the choices they make when it matters most. And in a small town where everyone now knew each other's names, where people looked out for each other, where a single dad's moment of courage had awakened the best in everyone, they were all heroes in their own way. The story of that night at Danny's diner became local legend, passed down from parents to children as an example of what people can do when they choose love over fear, community over isolation, and courage over comfort. 6 months after that fateful night, Marcus received an unexpected phone call. It was from the state governor's office. His act of heroism had been nominated for the State Citizen Hero Award, an honor given to only 5 people each year. "Daddy, what's a governor?" Emma asked when Marcus explained the call to her. "The governor is like the leader of our whole state, princess. And he wants to give Daddy an award." "Are you famous now?" Emma's eyes went wide with excitement. Marcus laughed. "I don't think so, sweetheart. I'm just a dad who did what any dad would do." But when the ceremony day arrived, Marcus realized just how much his story had touched people. The auditorium was packed not just with local residents, but with families from across the state who had heard his story and wanted to witness his recognition. Sarah sat in the front row with Emma, both wearing their best dresses. Emma held a sign she'd made herself, "My daddy is my hero." Sarah wore a small pin on her dress that read, "Danny's Diner Strong," a symbol that had become popular in their town as a reminder of how communities can come together. When Marcus's name was called, the entire auditorium rose to their feet. As he walked to the stage, his shoulder fully healed now but bearing a scar he'd carry forever, he thought about how much his life had changed. The governor, a distinguished woman in her 50s, shook Marcus's hand warmly. "Mr. Williams," she said into the microphone, "your actions that night remind us all what true courage looks like. You didn't hesitate to put yourself in harm's way to protect others. That's the spirit that makes our community strong." Marcus stepped up to the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces. He spotted Emma jumping up and down in her seat and couldn't help but smile. "Thank you for this honor," Marcus began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "But I want to be clear about something. I'm not here alone tonight. I'm here because of a community that showed me what real heroism looks like. When people heard about what happened, they didn't just say, 'Good job,' and move on. They opened their hearts, their wallets, and their lives to help a single dad and his little girl." He paused, his eyes finding Sarah in the crowd. "They showed me that heroism isn't about one moment of action. It's about choosing to care for each other every single day. That's what my community did for me, and that's what I hope to do for others for the rest of my life." The applause was thunderous. Emma was crying happy tears, Sarah was beaming with pride, and even some of the tough construction workers Marcus knew were wiping their eyes. After the ceremony, as they drove home in Marcus's truck, now fully repaired thanks to the community's generosity, Emma fell asleep in her car seat, clutching her father's medal. "She's so proud of you," Sarah said softly. "I hope she understands that this isn't really about me being special," Marcus replied. "I hope she learns that anyone can choose to help others when it matters." "I think she's already learning that," Sarah said, pointing to a drawing Emma had made that was taped to the dashboard. It showed stick figures of Marcus, Sarah, and Emma holding hands outside Danny's diner, with the words "Helping makes everyone happy" written in purple crayon. As they pulled into the parking lot of their apartment complex, Marcus noticed something different. There were more cars than usual, and lights were on in the community center that was usually closed in the evenings. "What's going on?" Sarah wondered aloud. They found out when Mrs. Patterson from the flower shop came hurrying over to their truck. "Oh, Marcus, perfect timing. We've been waiting for you." "Waiting for what?" Marcus asked, gently waking Emma. "Come see," Mrs. Patterson said with a mysterious smile. Inside the community center, Marcus gasped. The entire space had been transformed. Tables were set up with food, decorations hung from the ceiling, and a banner read, "Welcome Home, Heroes," in bright letters. But it wasn't just a party for Marcus. Posted around the room were photos and stories of other local heroes. Mr. Johnson, who had started a free tutoring program for struggling students. Mrs. Chin, who delivered meals to elderly residents. Tommy Rodriguez, a teenager who had organized clothing drives for homeless families. "You started something, Marcus," explained Pastor Williams. "When people saw how you put others first, they started asking themselves how they could help too. This isn't just about celebrating you. It's about celebrating everyone who's chosen to make our town better." Emma ran around the room looking at all the photos and stories. She stopped in front of one display that featured a picture of herself and Marcus volunteering at the food bank. "Daddy, look. We're heroes too," she called out. Marcus joined her at the display, reading the caption, "Marcus and Emma Williams, who show us that heroism is a family value." Every weekend, this father-daughter team sorts donations and helps serve meals to families in need. "When did they take this picture?" Marcus asked Sarah. "Last Saturday when you weren't looking," Sarah admitted with a grin. "The food bank director wanted to include you both. She says you've inspired 5 other families to start volunteering regularly." As the evening progressed, Marcus listened to story after story of how his actions had inspired others. The local high school had started a Heroes Among Us program, where students nominated classmates who showed exceptional kindness. The town council had established an annual Danny's Diner Day, celebrating community courage and kindness. Most touching of all was a letter from Jake Morrison, who had been released from jail 3 months earlier. He was now working at a construction company in the next town over and attending counseling sessions. His letter, read aloud by Sarah, brought tears to many eyes. "6 months ago I was the worst version of myself. I scared innocent people and could have seriously hurt someone. Marcus Williams stopped me that night, but more than that, he showed me what a real man looks like. A real man protects others even when it cost him something. A real man takes responsibility for his actions. I'm trying every day to be that kind of man now. I've been sober for 4 months, I'm working steady, and I'm volunteering at a crisis center, trying to help other people who are where I was that night. Marcus, if you're listening to this, thank you for saving me from becoming someone I couldn't live with being." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. As the night wound down, Marcus found himself standing outside the community center with Emma sleeping in his arms and Sarah beside him. The stars were bright overhead, and the town was quiet and peaceful. "Do you ever think about that night?" Sarah asked. "Every day," Marcus admitted. "But not in the way you might think. I don't think about being scared or getting hurt. I think about how it led to all this. How one moment changed everything for the better." "Emma's going to grow up knowing she's part of something special," Sarah said. "She's going to know that her community will always have her back, just like her daddy has everyone else's back." Marcus shifted Emma gently in his arms, feeling the weight of her trust, her love, and her future. "I used to worry that I wasn't enough for her. That being a single dad meant I couldn't give her everything she needed. And now I know that being enough isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, doing your best, and letting other people help when you need it. Emma's got a whole town full of people who care about her. She's got you. She's got more love and support than I ever imagined possible." Sarah took his free hand. "She's got a daddy who taught an entire community what courage looks like." As they walked back to their truck, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them here. 3 years ago, he'd been a broken man trying to raise a daughter alone, feeling isolated and overwhelmed. Tonight, he was surrounded by friends, engaged to a wonderful woman who loved both him and Emma, and living in a community that had become his extended family. The scar on his shoulder no longer ached, but he was glad it was there. It reminded him daily that sometimes the most important thing you can do is step forward when others need you, even when you're afraid, even when it costs you something. At Danny's Diner the next Friday night, their usual booth was full of more than just Marcus and Emma. Sarah sat with them now, along with Mrs. Patterson and her grandson, and Harold the cook had joined them for his break. Their table had grown just like their family had grown, just like their community had grown stronger. "Can I tell everyone the story again?" Emma asked, bouncing in her seat. "Which story, princess?" Marcus asked, though he knew what she meant. "The story about how you saved Miss Sarah and how everyone became friends." "Why don't you tell it?" Marcus suggested. "You tell it better than I do." Emma launched into her version of events, complete with dramatic gestures and sound effects. In her telling, her daddy was definitely a superhero, Miss Sarah was a princess, and the bad man learned to be good and became friends with everyone in the end. As Marcus listened to his daughter's innocent retelling of that night, he realized that maybe Emma's version was the most accurate after all. Because in the end, that's exactly what had happened. Good had triumphed over fear, love had conquered isolation, and a community had come together to prove that heroes really do exist. They just usually wear work clothes and drive old pickup trucks and worry about whether they're doing enough for their kids. The story of that night at Danny's Diner became local legend, passed down from parents to children as an example of what people can do when they choose love over fear, community over isolation, and courage over comfort. And every Friday night, when Marcus and Emma walked into the diner, when the whole restaurant smiled and waved, when Sarah brought Emma her chocolate chip pancakes with extra whipped cream, they were reminded that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is simply show up for the people you care about. Because in the end, that's what heroes do. They show up. They stay. They build communities where everyone belongs, where everyone matters, and where a single act of courage can change everything for the better. Marcus Williams went to Danny's Diner that night as a tired single father just trying to give his daughter a nice dinner. He left as a hero who had reminded an entire town what it means to be truly human, to care for each other, to protect the vulnerable, and to choose hope over fear every single day. And in a small booth marked "Reserved for Heroes," a father and daughter continued their Friday night tradition, surrounded by friends who had become family, in a town that had learned that the greatest strength comes not from being fearless, but from being afraid and choosing love anyway.